Welcome to Real Angel Chronicles. My guest today is Amanda Wideman, and she had an absolutely incredible out-of-body, near-death experience. So I'm so excited to explore that in depth today.
Jump right into my experience. So in 2017, I was 35 years old, and I was on a high mountain road, 35 or 36, I don't know. Anyway, high mountain road. My ex was driving the car, and it was one of those roads where on one side the mountain goes like straight up, and then the road is here, and then there's a big drop off with a little guardrail. And our car lost control. There was an oncoming vehicle that he lost control, and so we swerved out of the way to avoid hitting him head on. And so our car slid onto the gravel shoulder, and we were going too fast to suddenly hit a gravel shoulder, and so we started spinning. We spun around horizontally and ended up in the other lane. So we didn't hit him, but we ended up in his lane, and we hit the next car that was driving behind him. And after we collided with that other car, we ended up landing upside down with the roof crushed and the wheels up. And it was the car was teeter-tottering over that edge of the cliff. So the front end of the car was like over the cliff, and the back end of the car was hanging over the road. So we both lived and had minimal injuries, but it's kind of like the real world situation to give you context. What happened for me, I was working as a paramedic in the area, and I knew in the back of my mind that almost every car that has an accident there goes way over the edge. No survivors. I had like so many stories of just knowing of cars that had gone over. So when we hit the gravel shoulder and lost control, in that split second, I don't know why I did this, but this is just what happened. I closed my eyes, I leaned back in my seat, and I relaxed all the muscles in my body, just intuitively. I had this split second idea that I knew I was going to die. I knew I was going to go over the edge, and I wanted to die peacefully. I'd never studied death. I was not much of a spiritual person. It was just kind of an intuitive reaction. And the moment I resigned myself to death, kind of prepared to lift off, like, when you're taking off in an airplane, that's when my out-of-body experience started. And so my eyes were closed as we hit that gravel shoulder. But what started to happen was my senses left me. So it was like someone put on earmuffs or earplugs, and all of the heaviness and the tension that was in my body that I'd been carrying around my entire life was suddenly gone. And it was like someone had changed the channel. That's the best way I can describe it. I never visited another realm spiritually. I had no context. I was just suddenly somewhere else. It was like waking up, Earth being like a dream, and me waking up in a new place. And my eyes were physically closed, but it was kind of like my inner vision was open. The only way I can compare it is someone having a dream. Your eyes are closed in the dream, but you're seeing things, right? So my eyes were closed, my inner vision was open. But even though my inner vision was open, I was perceiving a dark room. So it wasn't dark, fully black. I could kind of just perceive that very faintly there were many beings around me. Silent. Nobody said anything. There was this, I was noticing that they were in unison. So there you could feel energy. So I'm not somebody who is sensitive to feeling energy, but there without the physical body and kind of like the barriers that we have with the physical body, being suddenly in a spirit form, you can sense everything. You don't need to talk about anything because everything is the truth. There's no hiding in the spiritual world. And so what I could feel coming off of this massive group, and again, I don't know if they were deceased relatives. I don't know if they were angels. I don't know if it was a mix of all kinds of helping spirits. All I know is that all of their individual energy that was kind of coming at me that I was noticing was so welcoming. It wasn't like any of them had a different energy. And so in that way, there was a oneness to them because they were all in the same space. They were in the same beingness. And I was just like them. And so this welcoming, loving, supportive, I would say almost like curious, like, oh, she's here kind of thing. I was like, this feels like home. And Earth, this accident only happened in like 2 or 3 seconds of Earth time, but it was like Earth went on pause and then this reality started. And I noticed that I had been there before. So the Earth version of Amanda and like all the memories that I had as a human were contained to the life of Amanda. Like I've never remembered previous lives or where I came from before, but the version of me that popped up there had full recognition, full memory that I had passed through here many times, and that the beings that were surrounding me knew me way better than anyone on Earth knows me or knew me. And so I had the sense that I was being greeted by like an eternal soul family that I never would have to explain myself to. I would never have to impress. I would never have to make any excuses for, because they could see my soul. They could see my intentions. They could see and feel my feelings. And I was fully accepted and approved of. There was no questions asked. And I think it's hard to compare it to Earth because we all have friends and family, but there's always something. You don't want to offend somebody, or, you don't want to rub someone the wrong way here on Earth. But there, all of that was let go because we could see each other for who we really were. And again, nobody said anything in human words. I didn't get some channeled message to bring back to humanity, and I didn't meet Jesus. All I could think to say or describe this place immediately after the fact was that it was like a waiting room or a welcoming room before moving on to higher dimensions. And before I knew it, I was upside down in a car looking at upside down trees going straight down, like, I don't know, like 700 feet, somebody said. And I could suddenly, it seemed like all my senses came back. It was like someone slowly took off the earplugs, and there was like, my ex was screaming, and there was all these bystanders and just all the chaos of an accident scene. And I don't know how long in spirit time I was there. It was probably like 2 or 3 seconds in Earth time. Wow. But I believe that I was there long enough in spirit time to kind of take in that welcome or that beingness or that love and belonging that we're all really truly craving in our life here as human beings, but we can never quite find it 100%. Well, it was there. And without the body and its history and its tensions and the trauma and all the stuff that we carry in our body, we immediately have access to that. So the body's kind of the only thing in the way, which is why I think so many people have such beautiful out-of-body and near-death experiences. So I was there in spirit time long enough to take in what they were sharing with me. And I would go beyond saying what they were sharing with me, what they were reminding me of. Because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, every time I've passed through there in between lives, it's kind of like a sigh. It's like, oh, I made it back kind of thing. And so I was with that long enough to absorb it enough to bring it back into the physical body, because when I opened my eyes and everyone was screaming, I was in this totally blissed out state. I didn't really care. I didn't care that we were upside down. It was very obvious that, okay, we're not going to die. We're like in a non-moving car now. Let's get out of here and get moving on with it. Like, what's the big deal? And once they got me out of the car and we were waiting for emergency services, I remember just sitting on the guardrail beside the smashed up car. There were still pieces of metal falling over the edge of the cliff. My ex was running down the highway in anger, trying to find who caused this. And I was just staring at the trees being like, wow, like, thank God I remember where I've come from. And there was nothing else except for this feeling. And it's more than a feeling. It's kind of like a sensation and a knowing through every cell of my body of who I am, where I've come from, where I'll go again, and that it doesn't matter what happens to the body because the real me is invisible spirit, and I don't need to worry about anything ever again.
Wow, that is so incredible. I'm so touched by that, whatever it was, a feeling of I'm home, because I think I certainly can relate, and I'm assuming a lot of people can. When I'm going through a stressful situation, even any type of feeling exhausted, stressed out, overwhelmed, I feel like I have just like a thought in my head of, I want to go home. It's not something I say out loud or talk to other people about, but it's just a thought. I want to go home. And I know I'm not talking about, my physical house. And it's just a feeling of, I want to go home. And so when I hear you talk about an actual experience of it, it's really touching for me because it helps me to imagine there's something maybe in my soul that is calling me back or wanting to call me back to that place.
Yeah, there is a real home that you're describing, a longing for that I have, that we all have if we're sensitive enough to notice it. And you're right, it's not necessarily a home on earth, because even if we got ourselves physically back to that childhood home or whatever, it wasn't always safe. It wasn't always perfect. But there is a place that is completely free of all of those things that were just not quite 100% in home here.
I try to imagine what that would be like because you'd been in an accident, so I'm assuming your body was pretty beat up, but you felt absolutely no physical pain whatsoever, not a trace of fear or questioning anything, no
No,
doubt.
no physical pain. I mean, I had some whiplash on my shoulder, but I'd had like plenty of worse pain in my life than that. Like it was kind of like a nothing. And my ex also, like, he had a concussion, but he was more or less fine. And so the fact that the roof was crushed right in the middle, the roof was crushed just behind us. So the back seat was okay, more or less okay, and the front seat was more or less okay, but that little space in the middle was completely crushed.
What about in terms of these beings? You said that you couldn't really see them, so you couldn't distinguish specific people or anything like that. But did you feel the messages you were receiving, was that telepathy?
I would say it was, looking back, I wouldn't have even known what these terms meant, honestly, back then. I had like no
Right.
concept of any of this stuff. I would say, I would even put telepathy as like having more clarity, would be kind of like a message or a sentence inside your head that's not audible. Beyond that, it was like, I would say it was almost like clairsentience. It was like super knowing. It was like someone is like thinking a thought. If I had a thought saying, I am so happy to see you, and you received it as this big burst of joy and happiness in your heart, but I never said anything. So it was like, if they could have said something, it would have been like, we are so happy to see you again. We are so proud of you. Um, we've been waiting for this day. How are you? Tell us all about how it has been. We're going to be together forever, even if we have lives in between that. So they didn't use telepathy to say those things, but that was kind of like what was coming at me as like an empath or a clairsentient person.
Wow, that's incredible. Because I think what it makes me think of is I feel like in most social interactions, even in places where we're really comfortable and with friends, there is a little bit of a mask that goes on. Even for me to show up to do this interview, I felt like I had to put makeup on, put on a nice shirt. Um, is that completely gone in this other space? Is there just
Completely
absolutely
gone,
nowhere
because
to be?
we don't have these bodies. So I relate to you too. I put on my earrings and I put on my eyeshadow,
Yeah.
and there, because we are not really with a physical body, we're kind of like with an energy signature. It's not that you couldn't, how do I say it? It's not that I couldn't perceive. Like I could kind of perceive and know that these were, even if it was kind of in the shadows, I could see that these were like humanish or deceased
Mm.
humanish kind of like shapes or beings. But like it wouldn't surprise me if one of those beings could like shift into a different appearance, because it had more to do with like their essence and how they felt, how they were making me feel. And I feel like it seems like feeling is kind of like, oh, come on, feelings are subjective or whatever. It's more than feeling. It's like what you are. So like, for example, if a kid walks in a room, kids can't hide anything, right? And a kid's
Yeah.
angry, and even if they don't say anything, it's like, we have anger here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just coming off of them. It's obvious in the expressions. And so even though I didn't get clear visuals on what they looked like, I don't even think it really mattered, because there it's only like what essence you're carrying, because everyone can
Mhm.
notice it, feel it, and read it.
Yeah. So you had mentioned sensing that you had lived many lifetimes when you were in the presence of these beings. Did you have any specific recollections of like specific places, dates?
Great
Um,
question. So before that, this all happened, I had really never looked into past lives. I didn't know if they were real or not. I kind of didn't care. In the actual experience itself, I didn't have any flashbacks of specific lives that I had lived, but I had the sense that I had had many, because I had the sense that I had come and gone from here
Mhm.
so many times. And I'm just kind of like bringing myself back to that place to see if I can catch any other memories. Um, there was an ancientness. Yeah, that's the other thing. There was a real ancientness to not just the beings themselves for sure, but an ancientness to me. And so it was kind of like, when I thought of, there was a moment where I could kind of like perceive that I had been on Earth, but it seemed like so long ago. I didn't care. Like I was kind of like, oh, whatever, that's done. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter because I'm here. I'm home. I'm whatever. But there was kind of like this ancientness, as though we had known each other in many different forms, many different times, perhaps friends and enemies. I don't know. But it didn't really matter who all the characters were, what character I played in any of these lives. It was kind of like this was where the real version of everybody was.
Wow. Yeah. And then did you ever have any sense of having anyone communicate to you that you needed to go back? Because I've heard that in a lot of NDEs, that you come to a point where it's like a threshold or a message of it's not your time. Did you experience anything like that, or do you think it was just too quick?
I think it was too quick. I also feel like there was just like, again, back to the no communications or languages or anything. It was kind of like everything was communicated by knowing. So at first, when I realized where I was and I was taking in the situation, it was like I needed to know who I was. I needed to remember this place, these beings, this kind of structure of like this realm, that's so close to where we are, really. And then once that knowing had absorbed, as well as this kind of like welcome and love and bliss, then there was a knowing that I had received what I needed to receive. There was nothing else for me to do there. There was nowhere else to go at this time beyond there. This was the message, what I was to absorb. And so once it was absorbed in me is when I found myself back. I hope that makes sense.
It does, yeah. And I really want to explore in depth this experience of bliss that you felt yourself in once you came out of the NDE. But I think this right now might be a good time to stop there and kind of go back in time to the person you were prior to the NDE, just to give us a little bit of context, and then we'll go into the bliss state. So maybe you could just do kind of an overview of where you already mentioned you were about 35 years old and with a partner. Maybe talk a little bit about your relationship, your work. You mentioned you weren't religious at the time, I think you said. So maybe just give us like an overview of all of that.
Sure. So leading up to the accident, I would describe myself as, with a very typical North American lifestyle. I worked full time as a paramedic. I'd been doing that for 13 years. I I was with my then partner, ex-boyfriend, for almost 13 years as well. Um, I was not religious. I would not describe myself as spiritual. Most of my energy and focus was going into making money, working my shifts. I totally loved my garden, my dogs, my hiking routine. Like I had a pretty good life. And so I think based on having all of these things that I'd ever wanted as a young person, I didn't really feel a need to be on a spiritual search. Um, as a young person, though, like as a child, I was brought up in dogmatic Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity. And although I didn't really connect at church spiritually, there was a spiritual side to me. I mean, kind of long story short of my childhood experiences, some nights I could see frightening beings in my room. Like I would have a nightmare and I would wake up, and for a long while I could still see the being in my room while I was awake, and I could see my bed and feel my bed and everything. Sometimes there would be like a frightening looking being in my room between me and the bathroom, and I would wet my bed because I was way too frightened to like venture that way. I also had one experience of seeing Jesus. Like it was the middle of the night. Um, he came to me. He looked kind of like some of those pictures in the children's books, but he was see-through and kind of white and blue. Didn't really matter like what he looked like, though. He probably appeared to me in the way that I would recognize him looking back. And the amount of safety and the amount of tenderness and the amount of courage that was emanating off of him. So like I'm kind of thinking back, I was probably clairsentient, empathic as a child to be able to pick up on the energies of beings back then. So I kind of grew out of that phase. There was no more sightings of Jesus or anything nice. It was like mainly dark beings and energies. By the time I was 7, I was just glad that I wasn't experiencing that anymore. I was a little bit more grounded in my physical body. And I went through the motions of going to church, and I loved the music. It's really good to feel good music. But once I got older, I'd had some negative experiences with leadership in churches, some manipulation stuff, and I just wanted nothing to do with it. I was very disconnected from those experiences as a child. And to be honest, I had blocked most of them out. And what I just told you came back to me after my near-death experience. So if you had asked me at like age 34, like how was your childhood with religion or spirituality, I wouldn't have even remembered those experiences, but they did happen, and my family, verified that I would talk about that later on. So that was my life before my NDE.
Yeah. And then how about, do you want to talk a little bit about your teenage years and your 20s and some of the difficulties that you went through during that period?
Absolutely. This is one of the most important, I believe now, periods of my life. It's definitely the most difficult. Around the age 14, when I was hitting puberty, I fell into an intensely deep depression. It didn't start as depression. It started actually as stomach issues. And we know now that many people's mental health is related to their stomach. Back then, we didn't talk about the stuff we didn't know. So I started off with these undiagnosable stomach problems, and I went to many doctors, many tests. I went through the whole thing. Of course, they didn't find anything. And then I would get more pain when I would go to school. I'd get more pain when I was in public. It got down to there were very few things that I could eat without experiencing that pain. And I developed an eating disorder. Then shortly after that, I started getting sleep paralysis. And that was very frightening. Anyone who's had sleep paralysis knows that. And then the depressions just started to deepen because I was less socially connected to the world, or I had friends, but nobody understood. I was put on many psychiatric medications over those years that had lots of side effects of weight gain and water retention and stuff that was really hard on my self-esteem. Didn't really need that. And then it kind of over those years, it was a total of probably 5 or 6 years total that it was really bad. But I would spend weeks just not leaving my room. I would sleep in my closet with like the door closed so that I had this like dark cave that I could kind of keep the world away. Suicidal ideations and self-harm. I still have scars on my on my arm from cutting. I didn't show anyone. I didn't want attention. My arms were covered up all the time, but I was a cutter. I had suicide notes. There were a couple times where I thought I was going crazy, and my parents took me to the emergency room. Um, and I was never diagnosed with anything other than chronic depression. But that period of my life where before the internet, where honestly, people just got medicated, that was definitely the hardest period of my life, hands down.
Wow. And how do you think that that related to your NDE experience? And why do you think that was such a critical period in your life? Because I know for a lot of people, we're desperate to avoid challenges of any kind. No, none of us want to have to go through a dark period, right? We all want to avoid it at all costs.
Yes.
So I'm curious to hear now, looking back, why you feel like that was such a pivotal point in your life, and especially in relation to the NDE and what you took from that.
Yeah. Okay. So just jumping back to seeing those really frightening beings in my room as a child and being able to feel
Yeah.
energy, I have kind of the hunch, and I've spoken to other near-death experiencers, out-of-body experiencers who have slipped out of their body at ease and didn't know why. But there's something that a lot of people have in common, and that is having these kind of in between, maybe quasi out of body experiences as a child where you're seeing other realms, whether it's good or bad. Um, there seems to be less of a attachment to the physical body because you're slipping in and out so much as a little child.
Mm.
That ability obviously can stay. Um, then fast forward to those teenage years I described, I didn't immediately have a connection. Like after my NDE, I didn't immediately see the connection. But fast forward to now, like I work as a coach now, and I am 100% certain that in order for me to be able to understand dark nights of the soul, for me to understand suffering, for me to understand the opposite of bliss, um,
Yeah.
those were absolutely necessary experiences. And, we've all sat with somebody kind of like on our worst day, and we can tell that that person does not get what we're trying to say about the darkness we're experiencing. And that is extra isolating. So, again, I can't say 100% certain why that happened as a teenager, but I do know that it's given me the experience of contrast.
Yeah. I guess I can start to see that because I feel like I've been through some dark times, especially in the past couple of years. And for a long time, it was hard for me to see any benefit at all. And I think you get kind of desperate to want to see some purpose or meaning in it. I guess that's one of the big questions of my life, really, is I mean, here we are having this human experience that, if we're honest, is full of, sickness, pain, anxiety, stress, exhaustion. Um, why? What is the meaning of it all? What is the purpose of it all? So, if you have anything that you can help us to understand that, just based on what you've been through in terms of the darkness and the comfort of the NDE.
Absolutely. So I definitely don't have all the answers, and it's taking me years. It will continue to take me the rest of my life to integrate this and to try and pick up on any knowledge and wisdom that might come to me. But after the fact, so going through the out of body experience, I had what I would say like the second time in my life I was in a dark night of the soul. So there was like 2 years that passed that were quite blissful. I made a lot of changes in my life. I was very motivated based on my experience to just like live life and make the best of everything that was happening. But after about 2 years, I really dipped. It was actually around when COVID started. And I do believe that like group energy affects each other. And it was around the time COVID started. It was actually a few months in. At first, I wasn't really that concerned. I thought it was going to blow over. I think we all did. And then there were things that started to go wrong, like not big things, but like things just weren't going well in my life. There was financial issues. There was issues with a friend or more than one friend, like just stuff kept going wrong. So then the COVID thing was happening, and I started to go into some of the darkness that I had experienced as a teenager. specifically of my eating disorder that I almost forgot that even happened because I kind of came out of it in my late teens. It the sensations and the impulses from that started to come back. I was really having a difficult relationship with food. The similar, not as bad, but almost stomach problems came back. I had a very hard time waking up in the morning. You know, you don't want to get out of bed. You just feel like crap. I was not able to see a positive future. It was almost as though that bliss from the NDE, I couldn't access it. Like I believed that it had happened. Like I know that it had happened, but I couldn't even feel into it or find it
Right.
again. So that dark night lasted about 2 years. And then it has been kind of like a slow rebalancing ever since to normal. So like I don't live in bliss and I don't live in the dark night of the soul, but I fluctuate like any other human being. And so finding meaning, I feel like I feel like finding meaning is so important because the dark night and spiritual disconnection can be so bad. So
Mhm.
um nothing I say is going to make it any better or maybe give meaning for other people. But for myself, I found that the second time, that 2 years after my NDE, where I was more of a spiritual student and I was looking for help from spiritual coaches and teachers, and I thought, I really need to understand this, or is it going to come back again and again in my life? Like I need to face this. And I realized that, when we're unresourced, when a human being is not supported or resourced or understanding what to do with really terrible feelings, they do whatever they can. They might numb themselves or run away or fall into an addiction, or just get worse, right?
Mhm.
But when we face and fully feel, learn how to hold on to a difficult feeling and ride it 100%, with support and with tools, then it has less power over us. And then often we can release that negative energy. And I started to learn about, like, where did some of these things start? Where did they come from? I think some things come from our family line. We can inherit things, or we can watch how our parents cope, and we can develop the same addictions or the same issues. And so in that 2 years, I had the chance to really learn how to sit with my feelings and feel everything fully, and use the supportive people in my life that knew about these things, that knew how to guide me, and that weren't scared of my feelings. They're like, I've
Mhm.
been there, kind of done that. Um, I think as humans, we carry a lot of energy in our energy body from terrible things that have happened in this life, as well as negative energy we've been passed on in our DNA, in our family line.
Mhm.
And um, sometimes it gets to like up to here where a person starts to get mental illness, where a person starts to get physical illness, goes into a dark night of the soul, so that like the real purpose would be so that all of that can slowly, layer by layer, be released, be understood, alchemized, and released, so that we can actually start to live a more enjoyable, clean life. But if we're
Mhm.
always running away and repressing it and pushing it down, it's really not going anywhere, and we're just recycling the pain. So, as far as having a purpose or a reason to go through it, I think that for some people, it's an opportunity to start letting this crap go. So, there is a
Mhm.
purpose in letting it go. But for people who don't understand that, who aren't resourced enough, it's usually like a living hell.
Yeah. So I love all that. I'm curious about what your process is for sitting with pain and maybe transmuting that in some way. Maybe going into a little more detail about how, if you've developed specific practices for that. Because one thing that comes to mind for me right away when you talk about this is my son. And he means the world to me, obviously. And I want, I want to teach him how to feel his pain and his anger and to deal with like needing to cry or needing to get angry. But I think as a parent, I really struggle with, well, how do I teach him how to feel those things? Because I myself don't feel like I know when he's hurting how to sit with it and process it and heal it. I think that's still kind of a mystery for most people. I guess we're in the middle of trying to figure it all out, even as a collective, maybe.
Yes, I love this question because people talk about it, but it sounds very vague.
Yeah,
I even to
exactly.
this day, I'm guilty of like saying what I just said and realizing, wow, that sounds really vague. I'll give you an example. And I think that for each person, it can look a little different. I've tried so many things that haven't worked, but I haven't
Yeah.
given up. And eventually I have found things that work for me. So I don't think there's like a blanket thing that works for everybody. Um, just 2 nights ago, yeah, 2 nights ago, I was getting these really big waves of anxiety, and I could not for the life of me figure out what they were related to. I was just suddenly feeling anxious. There's no issues in my life. I don't have any threats around me. And because I'm very committed to feeling going through this process on a regular,
Mhm.
I sat down, I turned off the lights. For me, I need to turn off the lights so I'm not overstimulated. I'm not getting
Mhm.
distracted. It was nighttime. I turn off the lights and I need to make my body feel safe. That's the first thing I need to do with distressing feelings. Instead of trying to analyze them and dive into them, I first need to feel safe. So I put on my most comfortable clothes. I have these like fur slippers. I wrapped myself tightly because some of us really need like a weighted blanket or a tight wrap like a baby to feel safe in our body. So I wrapped myself up with a blanket. I lit up my candle, something that smells nice,
Mhm.
and I tried to just ground into my body. And it wasn't perfect, but I got a little bit more comfortable. And then from there, I I brought up the image of me as a child. And this works for a lot of people is to try and imagine their inner child, and the first picture that comes to them, like you might see yourself at age 4. I said,
Mhm.
when is the first time that you felt this level of anxiety? And immediately you're going to see like you at a certain age in your mind, and hopefully a scenario comes up where it's like, whoa, that was scary. That was scary. And for me, I put my hand on my heart and I come kind of like in my imagination, kind of come close to the child. I come
Mhm.
close to the child and I just say, I'm here. I've made it to age 44.
Mhm.
I have confidence. I've got strength. I'm connected to God. And I know how scary this is for you. And I'm here with you. And sometimes I sing. Sometimes I play my drum. Um, and I basically communicate to that part of me that everything is okay because most of our issues of challenging feelings came when we were really little and we were unsupported, when we were alone and we didn't know what to do with big feelings. And so I really believe in inner child healing and kind
Mhm.
of like first making your body feel safe and then bringing into your imagination the version of you that really needs support to feel that thing. And
Yeah.
probably for like an hour, I sat there with my drum. I sat there with my drum and I was just singing. And after that time passed, my body came back into regulation and the feeling had moved through.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't know,
beautiful.
like that's just one story.
Yeah.
I've done different things, but I do think that for everybody who's having trouble sitting with a difficult feeling while it passes, figuring out what makes the body feel safe, where in the house, where do you sit? What do you need to smell? Do you need to eat something? Like, how can we start with the body?
Yeah.
Because that's going to bring down like a good chunk of it. And then, when's the first time you felt like that? Ah, it's here. Okay. What can we do for this child? What would it need? And then you're doing it for yourself because that inner child is inside of you.
Okay. Beautiful. I feel like I am going to take a lot of those practices and apply them myself.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
one interesting thing that I guess I've found is, and I don't know, maybe this is the first time I really said this out loud and having a hard time even articulating it, but I almost feel as though I'm having more anxiety now, even though I'm further along on my spiritual path. And maybe that has to do with increased sensitivity and awareness of everything going on around me. I think probably it does. Have you experienced that where it's almost more anxiety, or do you feel like you were completely healed of a lot of that anxiety based on your experience?
I love this question so much. I talk about this so much. So,
Yeah,
we don't have elders, we don't have old spiritual
yeah,
traditions that teach us how spiritual advancement works and what might happen along the way. And, you kind of got to dig into old books or look up really old lectures and it's fragmented information. And so because I'm passionate about this, I've gone on quite a deep dive over these last years to try and figure out what was happening to me. What is happening
yeah,
to my body? Why is anxiety increasing as time passes?
right,
Um, all of these questions. And it's actually completely normal for this to happen because what's happening is you are changing, even if you don't see that you're changing. So, on a spiritual path, naturally, over time, we're letting go of old attachments. We are not being driven by, our appetites, that we still have our appetites and our addictions and stuff, but they're not driving us the same way.
right,
And we are letting go of people that are dangerous or causing, ongoing drama in our life. So change, change, change. The ego, like our small self, has been relying on our appetites, been relying on codependent relationships, relying on our addictions in order to feel okay, to feel safe, to kind of be part of the group. And when spirit comes and is bringing us on this journey home, I call it the journey home, spirit will cause a loosening. In one old tradition, it's called the loosening of the Gordian knot. And
mm,
this loosening is like the last thing the body and the ego wants. It's not just this lifetime. Like we've been
yeah,
living like this, a regular human being for
yeah,
generations. Your past lives probably involved very similar ways of being. So, very suddenly and out of the blue, we're changing everything up. And the ego goes into panic. Like, what is going on? All of these things that gave me meaning and belonging and feel good, there's this force from spirit coming in, peeling them off like layers. This feels like I am naked. And it's very normal for someone on a spiritual path to get these massive waves of primal fear, fear of the unknown, fear of dying, almost like an impending sense of doom. And
mm,
and in one of the traditions that I was studying, there is a term for this, and it's called the meeting of the guardian at the threshold. And so we want to be moving into higher realms of reality. We want connection with our higher self and the angels. We want to feel the presence of God and the helping spirits. But in order for us to go there and experience that more often, the heaviness that we carry needs to be let go of because it's not a
mm,
match for how they operate. And so
right,
we've got this part of ourself that is like spirit, it's like fire, it's like pushing forward to go home to those things. And yet
yeah,
we still have stuck to us things that we haven't let go of or processed or understood. And so it's kind of like there's one part of us pulling us up higher into more truth, and this old part of us saying, this is too frightening, it's too scary, I'm not ready, I don't understand. And so that terror often comes to people who are actually um, having an acceleration of spiritual energy, because even though your physical body might look the same, if you could see your subtle body where all of these rearrangements of energy are happening, and where, like in the subtle invisible body, that's where those invisible attachments are getting let go. If you could see the rearrangement that was happening, it does feel like everything's falling apart and the system is going crazy.
yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So to comparing now dealing with Dark Night of the Soul versus what you felt when you first came out of the NDE, which you refer to as Bliss. Um, I'd love to just hear more about what that experience was for you, because I'm sure there must be a lot of people who are curious to know what that feeling is like. Because I think in a human experience, we all know what it's like to kind of just feel low level stress at all times, from when we get up in the morning to when we go to bed. So
Yes.
what even is bliss? even if you could describe it so we could try to imagine it.
Yeah. Um, so up until my out of body experience, I didn't know what this experience of bliss was like. I mean, everybody
Wow.
knows when you have like something really good happen, or you've had some drinks, or like, these physical pleasures of the body, they bring great feelings, but I would not, personally, I wouldn't describe that as anything like mystical or spiritual bliss, although those things are gifts. Um, when a person uh, leaves their physical body in their consciousness and in their subtle body layers, they no longer are feeling and sensing all of the trauma and the history that's stuck in the body. So every day, all of us, when we're walking around grounded in the physical body, we've got like our body memory of the nerves that get triggered when we see certain people, and like from morning to night, like you said, we've got challenging sensations going on that are trying to get our attention. If you could imagine that you were still fully awake and you were fully conscious and fully knowing of everything that you know right now, but you literally did not have the body, because all
Mhm.
of this stuff is literally stored in the physical body. And I would say
Wow.
also the first layer of the subtle body, which is the etheric body, there's a lot stuck in there too. But when those two things, the physical body and the first layer of the subtle body, are left behind temporarily, you are
Wow.
still fully you. You're not this dreamy, kind of vague, wispy thing. You're like more fully you than ever
Yeah.
without any of those things. And so that automatically equates bliss. It doesn't equate nothingness. It equates everything that's good about you. The goodness and the good karma that you've accumulated over lifetimes, that stays with you. That is the gold that doesn't get destroyed in the fire. And so these temporary experiences of bliss that people have, I don't think people are generally walking. You couldn't walk around with that all the time, or you wouldn't even have a body anymore. So
Mhm.
I think that they are glimpses that some people get in order to say, yes, this is real. Yes, this is for everybody. Yes, we have a place that we are going eventually, but we've got to, work on the physical body. And
Yeah.
how it felt for me on the day of that accident and for the time after that was like, I was not attached to the general things that I worry about all the time. I was
Mhm.
not attached to my concerns about my finances, even though I probably should have been. You do find that often after these experiences, people make a lot of reckless choices. Some are good and some are just reckless because they don't have those concerns in bliss. And
Mhm.
that's just the way it is. You are not worried. You might say, yeah, I understand if I make this financial decision, it's not going to turn out well, but it's going to be okay anyway because no one ever dies. You're just kind of like in this silly kind of jolly thing that nobody else gets. It
Yeah.
feels it feels as though you don't have access to the tension. You don't have access to the addiction. Like you're not reaching for the things in a general like sense that would make you feel better, like wine and chocolate. You don't even care about that because you already have that resident inside of you. It would be like when
Mhm.
you eat a huge piece of chocolate cake and you're enjoying it, and someone brings another, and you're kind of like, I'm full. Like, thank you, but it's with me, right? And so
Yeah.
you always feel like you just ate this huge chocolate cake and had this glass of red wine. You don't need more because you're just so, and it's better than that. But you know what I'm saying. Um,
Yeah.
but we can't, if our task is to be in the human body and it's to transform the human body. So we can't be wandering around like this all the time. That's not what we were
Mhm.
born to do. I think it's important for people to have that happen temporarily so that we can understand what is involved in the body, all the trauma and what needs, because when you come back in the body and it's still there, you realize, okay, I have a task.
Yeah.
So there was also this feeling with the bliss of being connected to other people. So even if someone walked in the room and I knew that they were like not the greatest person ever, probably couldn't be trusted,
Yeah.
there's this perception of the person in their greatest aspect. So say this is like not a
Mhm.
great person, but they're generous. They do have that going for them. All you
Yeah.
can feel from that person or see is that they are generous. You want to talk to them about the generous thing that they're doing. You want to encourage them. You're just so Pollyanna
Yeah.
that it sounds so ridiculous, but this generally happens to so many people. So I know it wasn't just me. So you
Yeah.
connect. to the higher self of other people, even if that other person is not connected to their own higher self, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're just seeing the bright side of everything all the
Yeah.
time. It's not permanent, but with that, so it was kind of like very present for 2 years for me. Um,
Wow.
I made a lot of changes and sudden decisions just based on a whim. Most of them turned out to be um, amazing decisions that I wouldn't change for the world. A few financial decisions I probably would change.
Mhm.
And then the dark night of the soul came, and then, like I said, like now years of rebalancing, just like a regular person. But with that rebalancing, I've had many, many occasions, like countless. I can't count them on my two hands of experiences of bliss. It's never lasted more than 2 or 3 hours. It usually happens either in meditation or when I first wake up in the morning. Not in every meditation and not every morning. I haven't found a pattern to it. It's just grace. I honestly say it's just grace. For whatever reason, it happens. And it's really important when it kind of hits that I stay still. Like if I get up and walk away and make breakfast, I'm just kind of like back in my regular. But when it comes on, it feels like an internal massage. Like my words are not going to be very sufficient, but it feels like someone is giving you a massage, but not just on your skin, on like every layer of every nerve that you have, plus kind of like a warmth, plus a huge feeling of feeling safety. Um, and I can't emphasize this enough for somebody who has struggled with anxiety on and off for years, the feeling of safety and presence, that presence, not in its full form, but that presence of those beings that were surrounding me in my out of body experience, they were giving off that bliss. They live constantly in that bliss because they don't have a body. And not only that, in the higher realms of reality, from what I've seen in other like shorter, smaller out of body experiences since, beings in the higher realms, the reason that they're not causing trouble or that they're not dealing with issues is because they have a clearer view of the Godhead than we do. So
Mm.
even though they are still like lower near to us, just up a bit, kind of like a bit removed from us, they can see more of the spectacular nature of eternity from their vantage point. And so it's impossible not to be in full bliss and awe and wonder and like heart warmth 24/7 when you have a glimpse of that. And so I believe that when we have these elevated states of bliss while we're in the body, they are temporary and they can be random. I think it's often as a result of going through a layer of a dark night of the soul and holding your faith. It's a result of letting go of an attachment that's dragging you down. It
Yeah.
has, I believe, a correlation to like even having a really tough conversation that you're frightened to have, but you know you need to do it. And
Mhm.
as these layers of darkness are left behind and you no longer live driven by them, you're naturally going to be closer in your vibration to where the angels and the higher beings live, who are closer to be able to perceive higher levels of reality and closer to the Godhead. And so we're like in the spiritual hierarchy, we're kind of like in some traditions, we're humans are called the tenth hierarchy of angels, and we're on our way
Mhm.
moving back up. And over long periods of time and eons, we kind of like sink into materialism, and then we slowly move up, and we let go, and then we come down. And so
Mhm.
if we think of ourselves kind of in this long term period of time of kind of moving up the hierarchies and moving down the hierarchies, that's why we have that remembrance of home, because we've been there many times. But Earth is
Yeah.
very slow. Things are
Yeah.
very dense here.
Yeah.
And so I think that bliss in the human body that many people describe, um, it should become more and more normal over time. I think it will be as we
Mm.
go into the future, as more and more people are doing this spiritual work that is so challenging, because we're removing the layers that are just between us and it.
Yeah. Wow, that is so fascinating. I love talking about this because, well, one spiritual text I've studied in detail is Course in Miracles. Have you heard of it? Have you looked at it? Yeah. From what I gather, the main message of the book is it's actually our physical body that is the cause of all of our suffering. And it's because when we're identified with our physical body, it causes the illusion of separation. If I wanted to just sum up the entire message of the text. And it sounds like that is your experience as well, based on everything you've gone through with NDE and everything after. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I love that. And great job to sum up A Course in Miracles in one sentence.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a
so
long.
I definitely agree with that. I do believe that there is a massive amount of soul evolution and soul growth that is possible in the human body. So it's not like, I mean, the human body is incredible. It's not like it's a mistake or
Mm,
that anything's gone wrong by us being in a human body. It's literally like the end of the spectrum of what's a great word? Like constriction, compaction, matter, density. And in that way, it's kind of like this eternal spirit that is so incredible is in this human body, seeing if it can master the things that we are faced with here. So it's easy for the spirit to be in the spirit world. You know, you think something and then you go to that place with your mind, with your consciousness or whatever. Here in the
yeah.
physical body, like a lot of people get frustrated because they believe something, they intend something, they pray for something, and it might take months or years before that happens. It might not happen in the way that they're hoping, like all these things, right? So it's a massive test. Can the soul, can the true part of us remember who we are while we're in this human body? Can we
Mm,
um can we accept the joy and the pleasure that does happen? I mean, it's not all bad. And can we try and live in the moment when those things do come and have gratitude and not hold on to them too tightly? Like the list of tests is endless. But the minute that we're out of the body, um, like I did have one experience later down the road where I was with, I would say, like, maybe not my higher self. I wasn't my higher self, but I was like a version of that, kind of like up here, looking down at earth with some people that I knew. And like up there, like there's no worries. There's no worries someone's gonna come in and yell at you. Like it's just impossible.
mhm,
You don't have that with you, right? So looking down on earth and just seeing the human versions of us walking around and encountering surprises and shocks and illnesses
mm,
and being challenged to hold love for ourselves while we were here. We were just in awe of those versions of us that were walking around in, like what you said, an illusion. Really, it is a massive forgetting for the most part.
yeah.
And after that, coming back into the body, I was like, okay, the body is really difficult and really challenging. But where I was just at from that perspective up there, there's not really much growth. Like we're
Yeah.
we're good, we don't not believe in God. All there is God, we
Yeah.
don't not believe in universal law. It is like happening right in front of us when we're up there.
Yeah.
So yes, I believe the body is the place where the suffering lives and where the illusions exist. Although for those of us that can remember at least something of the fact that we are more than the body and we are the spirit, we can take advantage of being in the body for our highest evolution.
Yeah. And so when you were in the NDE, did you actually directly experience that realm as feeling more real? As the Course in Miracles would say, this human existence is actually more of like the dream. Did that?
100%.
Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
When you wake up in the morning from a dream, you know how it is when you're like, that was a powerful dream. I remember a few aspects of it, but now I'm where, the real world is. Well, waking up, I would say, or switching channels to that realm where the out of body experience was, that was waking up to what was more real than earth was for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so fascinating. I'm curious to ask you also, did you feel like you developed any abilities following the NDE, such as like physical healing or any kind of new capabilities, I guess I could call it, following the NDE or in the years following?
First off, I was I didn't know anything about spiritual abilities. Like it sounded like something from a storybook. And I actually did believe like, okay, some people are energy healers or some people are this or that. I believe that it's real for them, that they are having an
Hmm.
experience of something that I don't understand when they're
Yeah.
doing energy work, but I can't relate to that. Like before my NDE. Afterwards, um, anything was on the table. Like I was like, what had just happened to me? I believe, like, if someone tells me a story, I'm gonna take it as a possibility about energy or special abilities. At first, I was extremely sensitive. I was extremely sensitive to other people's moods. Sometimes someone would walk in the room and I would just like know something about them. They could have like a normal face, smile and whatever, but the energy that was coming off of them was like, oh my goodness, this person just wants to rage, and no one would have noticed
Oh,
anything.
wow.
Um, that was really difficult because often in life, because we're human beings, we wear a mask. So whatever's going on the inside of us, often we just have like a smile. So it was like I was going around and like 90% of what I was experiencing from people was their energy or the mood that they were hiding. And 10% was like their physical
Wow.
appearance. And it was never a match. And it became really
Yeah.
draining to try and figure out what's going on. It was like everyone is lying to me and I'm trying to figure out the truth and it's taking all my energy and it's not the way to live, but that's just kind of what happened at first. So
Wow.
soon after that, I started reading about people who describe themselves as clairsentient, people who describe themselves as empaths, and I started to resonate with that as okay, that's what this is. It's definitely on
Hmm.
steroids, but that's what this is. After the 2 years passed, it was less intense. So I had obviously no energetic boundaries. I didn't know how to work with it. I didn't have a teacher. It was just like sometimes I just didn't even want to be around people because it was all this information was coming at me. Over the years, I started to learn more about this, realize that you don't have to feel like that all the time. You can kind of learn to turn it on and off to a
Yeah.
degree. And to keep, I wanted to feel my own feelings. I didn't want to feel everybody else's feelings. And so I would say that becoming more empathic and clairsentient was the first thing that I noticed. That's still very present with me. And I just choose to what I want to pay attention to. So as before, when someone would walk in the room and their energy would just like start to communicate anger or like whatever. Now someone walks in the room, I could probably switch and be curious and just kind of like feel into it. But for the most
Yeah.
part, it's shut down because it's not necessary or helpful
Yeah.
for anybody. And then my dream life slowly started to change. And so I would say this was in correspondence to different shamanic practices that I was doing at the time. I still do different shamanic practices. And often after a period of time with a certain type of practice, I would find that there were subtle shifts in my dreams, first of all. So I was getting dreams at first that were like I would wake up and think that was an interesting dream, forget about it, and then go through my day. And then at a certain point in my day, the exact sequence of what happened in my dream would start happening around me in life. I'll give you an example.
Wow.
Um, One night I flew into Delhi in India and I had one night in a hotel room there, and then I was to fly to Rishikesh the next day. And all the pictures I saw of Rishikesh, it was always just kind of like dry and a lot of people. Like I associated it with it kind of like a busy city. So that's all I knew about it. So that I had this dream in Delhi that I am standing in kind of like a jungle-like forest, and there's monkeys around me and I'm staring face to face at this huge black cow, this bull. And so there was nothing special about the dream. It was just really vivid. And I woke up and took note and flew to Rishikesh. And then the taxi that picked me up at the airport to drive me to my accommodation, there was like, I don't know, a 45-minute drive. And as soon as we got out of the airport, we were driving through jungle and foresty kind of jungle. And I'm looking out the window and the trees are looking so similar to my dream. And the next thing I notice, there's all kinds of monkeys, like all kinds of monkeys in this forest.
Mhm.
And then he stops at this stop sign. Um, And this group of cows, I didn't even know there was cows in this area, but this group of cows starts to cross the road, like a big line of them. So we had to stop our car and wait. And this one cow, it was a black bull, it walked up to the car and my window was down and it just put its head like up to the window and looked at me. And I was like, so that's just an example, but I would have dreams like this constantly where I would see a scene, I wouldn't think anything of it, and then I would go into my next day and it would be almost a replica of my next day.
Mhm.
And looking back, at first I was like, I don't know what to do with this. What's the point? Like, who
Yeah.
cares, right? I mean, it's very cool, but like, why would that happen? And I think that it was just being shown to me how reality works. I needed to learn that, yes, it's not just an out of body experience where time changes or slows down or speeds up. Time in general is indeed, like they say, um, it's not the way that we think of it as linear time, right? So that started to happen. I still work quite a bit with my dreams. Often, even like before I have a coaching call, like sometimes I'll have a nap and go into a dream, and then I'll have like a picture that has to do
Yeah.
with my client. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it makes sense to me, but mostly no. And then I'll tell my client, I'll be like, oh, that's what I need to know about that kind of thing. So again, I'm not a working psychic. I often get messages, but I often don't. And so I just remain open. If there's something that needs to come through to me or for someone else, I'm open. And if nothing comes, that's fine too.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's my answer to that question.
Did you feel any fear around starting to develop these abilities? Because I myself can relate to what you're saying because I've had some dreams that were quite vivid and then they turned out to play out in my actual life as well. And it scared me. I don't know how else to describe it. There's a huge wave of fear. I don't know what it was. Or maybe I don't want to know if something scary is going to happen. And so I think once it scared me, the dream stopped. And I haven't had them in, I don't know, probably a year now.
That's
Um,
really normal, especially
yeah.
growing up in the West. We don't have kind of a lineage of a culture where that is normal. Um, like when we go to pretty much anywhere in the developing world that still holds on to, people still have those abilities and it's actually not considered unusual. That's what I
Mhm.
found traveling is like no matter where I went in the developing world, if we talked about this topic, nobody thought it was cool. Like nobody thought it was unusual because like so many people or like a few people in every family can do this and they're just like whatever.
Yeah, that's
But I think that
interesting.
in the
It's just
West,
normal.
pardon me?
That's so interesting. It's just seen as completely normal. Where
Yeah.
here in the US, I think people would call you crazy.
Absolutely. Like we are so
Yeah.
far into materialism and like spirit doesn't exist in our
Right.
culture from many generations. And then you add on to that different teachings in some churches where unless prophecy or special dreams happen, they have to happen to people who are in the Bible. They can't happen to people now, or then it's like um it's bad or it's like some people even say like demonic or witchcraft.
Yeah.
This is just how the body works, but we've shut this down for a variety of reasons in the West. The whole rest of
Right.
the world never changed. They're still doing it. But because it's not
Yeah.
familiar to us, it makes sense that it would be scary. And if this had happened to me before my out of body experience, I probably would have thought it's scary because I grew up in dogmatic Christianity. And that's what my parents would have said about it if I went and told them a story about my dream. But
Hmm.
since the NDE, now I'm like, oh, okay, like this feels like how I'm supposed to be. In fact, I wish it would happen more because it feels like just a faculty that I should have that's shut down. I have the sense that I was in many other lives able to do way more with abilities than I can in this life. And so there's a part of me that misses it on the
Wow.
back. Uh,
That's fascinating. So maybe, because we always want to think about time, as we already talked about, linear, and to think that we are progressing. Here we are in 2025, but maybe we were actually in more advanced civilizations thousands of years ago.
Absolutely. Nobody wants to consider
Mind
that.
bending.
That's probably actually the case.
Yeah.
Um, but they're coming back. That's the exciting thing. Like, I think honestly, even conversations like this, I truly believe that if a person is kind of like at a tipping point where
Yeah.
maybe they were doing that a lot in a past life, uh, I think that things can like trigger in our subconscious. Like, yeah, like I'm okay with that. I would like to do that again. I think it's happening to more and more people. I talk to people all the time, and it's really
Mhm.
exciting because it's kind of like, going through life not having use of one of your fingers, and then it starts to come back, and you're like, whew, that feels more like a fit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, I could keep talking to you for another hour to keep going, but I guess if we wanted to start bringing this to a close, um, what do you feel like people who are going through a dark time or a struggle right now who are listening, what do you most want them to hear? What do you most want them to know from your experience?
Yeah, so important. First off, that there are certain lies that darkness tells us. So the dark, frightened part of our mind that is disconnected, we all have that, even if we're not in a dark night of the soul. So lies that the darkness tells us is that this is a permanent situation, that we're
Mm,
always going to feel like this. And that
yeah.
for some of us, we've been in it long enough that it's always felt like this. That's actually not true. You just can't remember feeling well because you've felt horrible for so long. So I would like to confront the lie that the darkness tells us of that this is permanent. The next one is the lie that you are to blame or responsible. After a certain amount of time, we start to take this personally, like maybe we've done something wrong, maybe we're just special in the way that this is happening to us. I
Yeah.
promise you, you're not special. I promise you that well, yeah, every true spiritual student, spiritual initiate is going to go through dark nights of the soul where they're facing the darkest things that they could possibly imagine or feeling them. And so, um, no, you are not to blame. You are actually probably experiencing an acceleration forward, but some of these things that are in your field are being brought to your attention because they're too heavy to move forward with you. And it can take time for the layers to be released and let go of, as well as support and resources so that it can be facilitated properly. Um, and and to put one foot in front of the other. Like sometimes we feel like absolute crap for days, weeks, or months. And the only thing that we can do is like get out of bed, hopefully have a shower, and try and feed ourselves something that's like half healthy. And if that's all that you can do today, well, congratulations, because that is also part of it. We need to be able to make it through days like that and still at the end say, I was able to make it through that and I am still standing. And there will be a day that comes where you are saying that to somebody else the way that I'm saying that right now. I promise you that day is coming. Um, and that honestly, like if you're in that dark night of the soul and you're not full on into addiction and you're not full on into dissociating or numbing yourself, you're doing your best to feel and try and make sense of difficult things that are coming up, then you are in a process of being called home. Because when those layers are peeled off, there's less between you and the beauty that is in this universe. And so that is where you're going. So whatever it takes for you personally, whatever resources work best for you personally to feel safe, to make your body feel safe enough so that you can like feel what is really painful in the safest way, most comfy way possible. Let it go, thank it for what it has taught you, and just say, you're free to go. You might have to do that like 10 or 20 times with the same issue. That's normal. um,
Yeah.
but you're being called home by these layers hopefully getting removed.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I feel like those are words that I myself needed to hear. So I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for you sharing your story and the whole story too, the darker parts of it and the blissful parts, because it gives me hope. And it's almost like, um, sort of like you beckoning me forward is what it feels like.
Yeah, that's what we do. I promise you it gets better. It's never going to be, I also like to say to people that often, um, we don't realize that actually the worst is behind us. Like when we were
Mm,
children and we were experiencing very distressing emotions or circumstances, we were most likely alone or felt unsupported with the adults that were around us. That was the
right,
worst of it. We're not going to ever have to do that again.
right.
Although those sensations could be buried in our body. So you can absolutely allow them to move through and feel it again because the worst is over.
Mm, right. Well, thank you so much for everything that you shared, Amanda. I'm so grateful that you were here tonight. How can people reach you if they'd like to connect with you, learn more about you? What would be the best way to reach you?
Yeah, my website, lionspiritcoaching.com. You can connect with me there, and I do coaching. I do reasonable rates, and even people who can't fully afford what I charge, I can make it work because I think it's really important if you're experiencing any of these things that we talked about today to reach out and get help. I know I didn't ask myself enough for help when I needed to. And the type of people that usually do contact me, first off, like I think they're just incredibly courageous people who are absolutely committed to dealing with these layers as they come, committed to learning how to feel safe and feel what's there. And that's mostly what we focus on. These are people who know that they're being called home. Um, and that's what I love to do.
Well, it sounds like you found the perfect place to be. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for sharing such a beautiful, uplifting message.
My
So
pleasure.
grateful. Thank you.